Morning all. A very fine win by Magnus Carlsen against Nakamura was played in the Tata Steel Tournament, round 8. Okay, let's have a look at this game. I've checked out the actual comments by Magnus himself. That's on YouTube as well. Some very, very interesting insights. Basically, I think the theme of the instructive themes are like line opening and major prophylaxis with his own king safety. In this game, we'll see his king really neatly tucked away before progressing his attack, and that's to stop all black's counterplay major concrete threats on the c file. Like knight a3s, they're all ruled out with this king maneuver in this game to a1. So it's a brilliant game. It reminds me a little bit of a game I once played, where I was really happy to get in g6 as well against Murugan, who was 24-20 back in 1993. I'll put a link to that video as well, just in case you're interested in this g6 idea. But of course Magnus plays the whole game magnificently, and there's a lot of line opening, not just for g6 but also for f4. So the f and h files are shredded open. Okay, let's get on to it. So e4, and after c5, earlier in the tournament Magnus had a bit of a draw, a quiet, quick draw against Vichy Anand, but here he's got something tucked up his sleeve in this seemingly innocuous start of this game. Innocent, innocuous. So a6, bishop e2. So the English attack is what I once played, bishop e3 with f3, but no, if you play f3 and want to play f4 later, you're losing a tempo. So this is kind of interesting, this bishop e2, still with the idea of ripping open lines on the king side later. e5, okay, which maybe some people as white would be concerned about changing the nature of the game now that black's played e5 and maybe going for the d5 square. There's other strategic plans you could use against that d5 Boleslavsky hole. Knight b3. I mean, we've seen Natalia Poganina sort of play manoeuvres against it, more positional. Sorry, not this one, rerouting this knight eventually, to support d5. But in this game, it's not about d5. It's about black casting kingside and getting kind of attacked with lots of line opening. So bishop e7, and instead of the routine casting, which would imply black's playing classically maybe, and then maybe later like king h1 and f4, kind of standard moves I've seen before. But Magnus inserts another bishop move first, so maybe this can be considered a high class waiting move. And Naka maybe he didn't need necessarily I think to commit to castling here, but he did castle here, and maybe was a little bit surprised then that Magnus changed the nature of the position now into a kind of king attack, late Kerr's attack with g4. Kerr's innovated this g4 with great results. So g4. So does black want to strike back in the centre? They say that to counter a flank attack, you can sometimes counter attack in the centre. So maybe the potential threats of d5, but d5 never happens in this game. But bishop e6 is played anyway. So maybe this b5 and bishop b7 is a bit slower than just bishop e6. c4 is quite a concern, I think, for white in this game. But g5 now. Okay, chasing that knight back, so white's getting a bit more control of d5 as well as potentially supporting some line opening operations. So that's the plan, to support g6 to try and rip open the h file. h4, and now we see knight b6, so no b5 at all put into this game, just piece pressure on c4 and the c file. Magnus was going in his analysis about a5, a4 also being kind of a dangerous idea. So queen d2, now this other knight comes to d7, and now we see a seemingly anti-positional move, but it's got line opening benefits. So f4, so this big trade-off, you want to rip open the f file to get a semi-open f file. On the other hand, you might be concerned about a big knight on e5. I know I am, after some of the recent over the board games giving the opponent a big knight on e5, but this happens anyway because white's going to castle queenside, and this f and h file are both very, very useful for attacking resources and combinations later. So knight e5, which also eyes the c4 square again. So white's got to be very careful with his king, because things, with a rook on c8, things like knight b2 or knight a3, exposing this as being quite embarrassed on the c file in many variations. So after castling queenside rook c8, pressure is being exerted by all of these guys on c4. So don't panic. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What does Magnus do? This is really, really neat prophylaxis being demonstrated in this game as a prelude or as a way of progressing white's attack safely without getting completely destroyed in the process on the queen side. It starts off with this little move king b1, and now queen c7. Okay, putting even more pressure on the c file, but h5 preparing that strategic threat, g6 to rip open more lines. Now we see rook fe8, and now again a nice little safety tucking move to avoid things like knight c4 to a3, because sometimes there's going to be horrible things after that, there's particular variations actually which Magnus showed to do with this, which were ruled out again by this king a1. It's a move which maybe a lot of us wouldn't do here, because we wouldn't be sort of calculating well as in advance as Magnus either. I wonder if I can give a token variation actually here, an example. If king a1 is not played, if I add a Qb6 and we give a different move, like say g6, which is sort of routine. Okay, this is given an advantage now for black. Knight ec4. So if we take, see now there's going to be problems, I think. Say queen d3. Well, there's problems actually here with bishop f6. That'll be good for black as well. This c3 is a bit of a problem. So this is potentially dangerous, this position. Also knight a3 check here might just be okay in this position for white. Alright, let's get back to the game, not to get too drowned in engine variations. Back to the game here. So with this nice tucking move, prophylaxis, okay, now we're ready for the attack. So bishop f8, okay, knight d4. So Magnus's idea, making use of these two squares, particularly he wants to get in knight f5. Now this is regarded by Magnus as one of the major blunders by Naka, this queen c5 move. It later had to waste time anyway, b6 to a5 later, as I was going to see. So g6, and Magnus was saying as though the game was strategically decided. It's lovely to get in this g6 because it is line opening that h file. Knight ec4. Now Magnus takes. Okay, he wants to make sure knight b2 isn't a major threat, so he keeps an eye on that. Queen d3, but there's a nice pivot from d3 to g3. From g3, there's a double attack on these guys, threatening all sorts of things. Great coordination on d6 and g7, as well as protecting c3, so attack and defense with this lovely queen d3 as the prelude. So f takes g6, hg. We've opened up now the f file and the h file. h6 and now queen g3. So beautiful moves so far with the king for prophylaxis and the queen for attack and defense, and supporting things like bishop h6 and knight f5s and knight d5s. There's lots and lots of threats emerging now. So here is where Naka, okay, he attacks with tempo b2, so something has to be done about queen takes b2 as a mate threat. Bishop c1, which was another point, to be able to neatly tuck that bishop to defend. Queen a5, and now with other threats like knight takes b2 and rook c3. So how are these extinguished? Well, here Magnus apparently fought for about 20 minutes coming up with this next fine move. He plays, actually, even though this looks really kind of scary on a2, there's some coordination going on here for all sorts of threats. He plays this move, Rook Df1. Now let's actually check this with an engine bit, so just again, just to show, there was a beautiful variation which Magnus demonstrated why this isn't working. Knight takes b2. Okay, well, it's just knight takes e6 here. It is adequate. Was there anything else? Not particularly. Knight a3. Again, you know, knight takes e6. There's not really much going on for black. Okay. Let's not get too distracted again. So Rook Df1 was played after 20 minutes for Knight e5. So we've got these blasting rooks down the F and H files. How do we use them? Well, Magnus is keen actually to sack a pawn to get access to Knight f5 as a new threat and extinguish this threat of Rook takes c3 here, which now has emerged after that knight retreat. It's unveiled this idea of Rook c3 and Queen a2 mate. So attacking the fence, not only extinguishing the threat on a2 but also in creating a new strategic threat of Knight f5. He plays this beautiful move, Knight d5. Also in this position, well, we'll note that the c2 pawn is also protected by the knight at the moment, so it's again attacking the fence by a lot of pieces actually, not just the queen, but now joined by this guy and this guy, all attacking and defending with their operations. So bishop takes d5, so black's losing any counterplay on a2 now after this pawn sack. And Magnus is gaining knight f5 as an attacking resource. But first, before knight f5, there's a beautiful move here to further rip open the lines. I wonder if you can guess it if I give you 10 seconds here. Okay, bishop takes h6. So now we see g takes h6, which might not be the best defense, but let's go with it. g7. So Naka plays bishop e7, and then we have rook takes h6. So major threats with these heavy artillery guys on the f, g and h files. So things like rook h8, pretty devastating. Knight f7, and now we see another neat attacking move, queen g6, sacking the exchange. So knight h6, queen h6, threatening queen h8 mate. So that's defended with bishop f6. Okay, so shielding the f file to allow king f7, and also if rook f6, then the back row's weak, rook e1. But there's a neat little trick here. So I wonder if you can spot this neat little finishing trick. If I give you 20 seconds, or you want to stop the video. Okay, starting from now, I wonder if you can spot a neat little combination here. Okay, I think it's pretty neat myself. Check. Now here, 10 seconds. Okay, he gives up the potential queen. So takes, and now here, 5 seconds. Magnus takes with the queen, because the king is being sucked towards the centre, and this decisive rook e1 check, and now forcing Naka to resign. He's getting mated actually. King d7, just queen e7 as mate, because this knight is stopping the exit point c6. Beautiful game, really beautiful game. Lovely attacking chess at the highest level. Amazing that the brilliant tactician Nakamura is destroyed in this game through this brutal line opening attack on his king side. So Carlsen is showing he's a really dangerous fighter, even though he might have started the tournament not as ideally as he intended or expected. He can certainly crawl his way back to the leader spot in any tournament. He did so in the London Classic, and he seems to be doing so now in the Tata Steel tournament. So King A1, brilliant prophylaxis, we've seen in other Magnus Carlsen games, to continue an attack safely without risk to his own king getting slaughtered in the process, combining attack and defence with several key pieces here. Not just the queen for attack and defence like this later, obviously not now with the knight on e5, but also these guys extinguishing, like this one extinguishes this guy's threat, or rather this one with a pawn sack later, so that's attack and defence, making way for this knight to go from its previously defensive passive role on b3 to this very, very dangerous attacking role on f5. So it's like all the pieces are getting promoted from their defensive postures, and the signal for that promotion was this neat, very neat tucking away of the king. Somehow this game has an aesthetic beauty and logic to it, which I'm hoping is going to be more memorable and instructive for us. So the key prophylaxis of moving the king safely to a1 is a prelude for many of these pieces turning over their roles from defensive roles to attacking roles. So the knight first goes to d4, making way for this one to later do a pawn sack for that knight to gain access to f5. So queen c5. Now the major line opening strategic break g6. Okay, the standard counterplay on c4 because black has that Sicilian defense semi-open c-file, but bishop c4. Now queen d3, so keeping hold of the c3 knight against knight b2s. Now a bit more line opening. Now queen g3, keeping hold of c3 but starting attacking implications. Queen b6. Now this bishop is relegated into defensive mode, of course, with bishop c1 to defend the mate threat on b2. So queen a5, with potential threats building up of rook c3 with the idea of mating on a2. For the moment though, rook df1 seems very safe under engine scrutiny. There's nothing going on here too dangerous. After knight e5, yes, a concrete threat emerges of rook takes c3 and queen a2 mate. But here, the promotion of this knight from its previous defensive role to its more grandiose role of attacking the black king now, but the prelude to that knight d5 to get rid of that defender of the light square, so sacking a pawn, giving black Naka a temporarily seemingly powerful queen in the centre. Okay, but it's got no coordinating pieces against the white king here. So now, from a defensive role on c1, it's not needed anymore defending b2. It just sacrifices itself, this dark square bishop, for more line opening now with g7. Major concrete threats now are being created. So bishop e7, rook takes h6, threat, mate in 1 with rook h8. Knight f7 parrying that mate threat. Queen g6 renewing a mate threat. Queen h7, and that's right. That's the major mate threat. Rook h8 again. There's still knight takes and king takes. So the major threat is queen h7. So knight takes h6, queen takes h6. Again a mate in 1 threat. Now bishop f6 fails to this beautiful combination. Simple, beautiful, effective. Queen check, give up the advanced pawn, queening with check to be able to play queen takes f6, and then this nice rook e1 check. So mating the black king in the centre. If Naka had played on king d7, there'll be the move queen e7 mate. A striking impression is made of this game. I'm going to award Magnus Carlsen King's Crusher points because this looks like a beautiful King's Crush game. The black king being crushed like this with this beautiful line opening, beautiful attack and defensive measures at the same time, beautiful prophylaxis with the king. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.